Hello everyone and welcome to Geopolitical Trends. My name is David Oualaalou. It's so good to be with you as always. Well, it looks like President Xi of China had to teach a lesson to the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on the sideline of the G20 summit in Bali. So in this video, I'm gonna provide you insight as to why that is, which will make your head spin. So before I'll jump into that topic, make sure please to subscribe and smash that notification button so you will be notified anytime I upload a new video. And please make sure to watch this video in its entirety. That will help me out as far as the algorithm. And as always, I can't thank you enough for your support. It means a lot. So let's dive into this apparent short video that's now circulating across the social media outlets as to what happened between President Xi and the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. So, well, as I said, the video has emerged already on social media in which the Chinese president, President Xi, that is, appears to be expressing his displeasure and scolding the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, for leaking inaccurate information to the press. Yeah, can you believe that? You know, the two leaders had an encounter. They talked, of course, privately and all that. But what the Canadian Prime Minister ended up doing is he leaked the information to the media, which, by the way, was not accurate to begin with. And just the fact that Justin Trudeau released or disclosed that information to the media is a breach of protocol. You know, that's not how things done when it comes to international diplomacy. That conversation is a private between the two leaders. So I don't know what was going through Justin Trudeau's mind. Somebody who seems to one day say one thing and the next day does something else. You all remember what he did with the Canadian truckers demonstrations and how he embarked on some dictatorial measures. And yet he claims we are in support of free speech. That's a lie. Basically, I lost respect for Trudeau altogether. But I'm not here to talk about Trudeau himself. I'm here to highlight to you what exactly happened. So as I said, the video is now circulating across social media, by which in which, by the way, President Xi Jinping appears to be expressing his displeasure to the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And usually this video was from an interaction between President Xi and the Prime Minister of Canada on the sideline of the G20 summit. So here's the thing. President Xi claimed that everything they discussed in the meeting was leaked to the press, which, as I said earlier, that's a no-no. It's a breach of confidentiality and the international protocol for how things work. And he added, President Xi, that is not, and I put this in quote, by the way, that is not appropriate. And rightly so. So President Xi was right. It is not appropriate for you, if you had a meeting with a head of state, to disclose that information to the media. Yeah, that's kind of, it's a low, very, very low of Justin Trudeau to get to that point. And only this comes, of course, after Justin Trudeau was ordered to go after 3 Chinese companies in Canada pertaining to the lithium. I did release that video. I'm sure you watch this one. And if you don't, just make sure you take a look at that video. And I will put a link for you in the description in case. No. So here's the thing. President Xi went ahead and claimed that the information leaked, that is, to the press, did not reflect how the conversation went in reality. So saying it in a simple terms in English is that Justin Trudeau lied. That's the bottom line to it. So President Xi was kind enough not to use the term lie, and he wanted, he kind of used some sort of an easy language, shall we say, by saying the conversation was different from what was in reality. But the bottom line is that Justin Trudeau lied. So in response to that, Justin Trudeau rejected President Xi's claim by saying, and I put this in quote, let me get you the quote, guys, and here it is. It says, "In Canada, we believe in free and open and frank dialogue. We will continue to work constructively together, but there will be things we will disagree on." End of quote. I'm laughing out of the idiocy of the Justin Trudeau statement, because all this is nothing but a consumption of ink. It's a lie. If you care about free speech, how come you are for the measures he decided to embark on against the truckers in Canada? Aren't they free to express themselves? When he lashed out at them by ordering his law enforcement to really get physical with the truckers, they shut down their bank accounts, Then where is this democracy? Where is this free thing? So free things only apply to other countries, but not yours. So that's the double standard. So, but here is what's interesting about all this is that President Xi walked away. If you look at the video, you will see that President Xi walked away from the Justin Trudeau at this point after saying, because Trudeau said, let's create the condition first. President Xi realized that the Canadian Prime Minister is just spewing lies because he is probably ordered to act in that manner. And it's no secret, guys. We all know that Canada, it is a sovereign nation. Yes, it is on a paper, but that's about it. Did you know that the King of England, now that King Charles, still the head of Canada? And before him, it was his mother, Queen Elizabeth. I lived in Canada, so I'm very familiar with how that society operates. And even when I used to live back then, which was back in late 80s or early 90s, it was a problem at that time. And if you allow me to share this story with you, it was the problem at that time was Quebec. The region of Quebec wants to be independent from the rest of Canada. And you know what I found out? Is that Quebec can sustain itself economically without the rest of Canada. And guess who resolved that problem? At that time, used to be the Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney. I remember him. And guess who resolved that issue? It was the Queen. The Queen took a flight to Canada. I was there for her to settle that issue because Canadian government couldn't do it because they were under orders from the Queen at that time. So that tells you right there. So if you are a sovereign state, you can't be behaving like that, just following orders blindly. I look at it with this case of the three Chinese companies, just didn't make sense here. But one thing you need to understand within this context is you have to understand it as far as how the relationship between Canada and China is today. So, well, of course, both countries have a strained relationship, and it has been for a while now. So China and Canada do have a strained relationship, which goes back in time. That's nothing new. Especially now, the strain in this in China and Canada relations sort of sharpened back in 2018. You all know what happened in 2018, where Canada was ordered by the United States to arrest the Huawei executive over an American warrant. So, and in retaliation, of course, Beijing went ahead and arrested 2 Canadian citizens. Tit for tat. What do you expect? They're going to have to behave that way. So, the other aspect from a historical perspective that you need to know, and this is not pertain to the political aspect, but rather the historical context. What you need to understand is the relationship of China and Canada during the time when Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who is Justin Trudeau's father when he was a prime minister. Well, when Pierre Trudeau was elected the Prime Minister of Canada in 1968, One of Pierre Trudeau's foreign policy objectives, guess what? It was to establish diplomatic relations between Canada and the People's Republic of China. And he succeeded. The relationship between Canada and China at that time was great, not only from a political aspect or diplomatic, but also from an economic perspective, you know. And this, in the process, it contributed to sort of the closer integration of China into international world order. Yeah, that's Pierre Trudeau was well revered, was respected in China. I did read up on some of his encounters with the Chinese officials back then, and it's always regarded him in a high esteem. Unlike his son, Justin Trudeau, who seems to be just bowing to pressure from his masters. That's basically what it is. So, Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, you know, basically when he reached out to China, this initiative, it led to about 30 years. Yes, get this, guys. 30 years of a flourishing Canada-China relations that was based on this early friendship. Pierre Trudeau had a friendship with China back then. And also it was just not only friendship, but it was also a goodwill. Because it was that era had ended basically with the coming to power of the Conservative, because that ended once, and I remember him, it was the former Prime Minister of Canada, his name is Stephen Harper, when he came to power in 2006. That kind of friendship ended. Why? Because Stephen Harper was also ordered to embark on a different policy. It amazes me, it really amazes me how those Western leaders don't have a backbone to stand on their feet and say no. This is where I admired, what's his name? Orban of Hungary, which by the way, I will be releasing a video about how he took stand against the EU and block 18 billion euros for as an aid to Ukraine because of the welfare of his country first, and rightly so. So it's no different than what's happening in Canada here. And here is another astonishing thing that is happening also on the heels of, that comes on the heels of all this, is that the Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada, the Foreign Affairs, not the Prime Minister, Foreign Affairs, her name is Melanie Joly, made the remarks at the Menck School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto by saying, and this is of course ahead of the government, Canadian government that is, introducing an Indo-Pacific strategy next month. They will be releasing. It's like what we do here in the United States with the 2022 strategic evaluation. And I did share with you some. Canada does the same thing. So, well, what's her name? Melanie, of course she had to dance to the tune of what her masters are telling her to do. And she's saying, and I put in quote, because I did find the quote and I find that I just shook my head. But I'm going to share it with you. The quote is this. This is what Melanie said. The China of 1970 is not the China of today. China is an increasingly disruptive global power. End of quote. But she added also, which is like the top of her head, it just added, and I quote, China that is, it seeks to shape the global environment into one that is more permissive for interests and values that are increasingly depart from ours, end of quote. So what kind of values is she talking about? If you're talking about freedom, how come you didn't allow the truckers to express their discontent with the government? Because they refused to have a vaccine or whatever that was. So how come the government went ahead and shut down their bank accounts or closed their bank account? You know, then where is this freedom? Or where is this democracy? So, and this is what I always say. What we say versus what we do are two opposite ends. And when you do that, guess what you lost? You lose credit. You won't have any more credibility whatsoever. And this is what's happening to the Western world. I'll be comfortable in saying that the Western world is on its last leg of its hegemony. Sadly, you know. And a side note of all this, interesting enough, is that during this G20 summit, leaders meet with each other, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes in groups, and they're just part of it. What I do not like about this kind of forums is, for example, in G20, you know, it was supposed to be for economic aspects of it. You don't turn G20 into a security forum, you know, or you turn it into a health care forum. It's for economic aspect. I mean, if you compare that to what took place with ASEAN, which, by the way, it just happened also 3 days before G20 started in Cambodia. That's where they had the ASEAN meeting. And in ASEAN, they weren't talking about securities. They were talking about the welfare of the ASEAN countries, which is the right forum for it. If they want to talk about security, they're gonna embark on a different meeting and call it, this is the security, whatever they want to talk about. So, and this is one thing about Indonesia. I don't know why they allow themselves to go, especially with the healthcare, because what they were talking about, especially the Indonesian minister, that calling for now you have to have digital ID or some. Whoa, where are you going with this? You know. Because you start to get the hint that is Indonesia being ordered here to follow certain protocol? Makes you wonder. And I'll let you reach that conclusion yourself. I will not reach it for you. But here's the thing. During the G20, which by the way concluded, by the time you watch this video, the G20 already concluded. Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, had claimed a diplomatic, listen to this carefully guys, had claimed a diplomatic win from meeting with President Xi. So, just the statement itself says it all. If you are after a victory rather than truly work out the differences, then you all see where this is going. It's nothing but a photo op again, another one like what President Biden had with President Xi, you know. Albanese, for me personally, the guy is or the prime minister, you give him the proper respect. The prime minister is so weak politically, despite what you hear. And because he's saying that Albanese urged the Chinese president to end the threat of conflict over Taiwan. I mean, what's wrong with those leaders? Australia, you, the Prime Minister, have an issue with trade with China, and you are worrying about Taiwan? It just doesn't make sense. It defies logic. So what kind of leaders are they? You know, it just didn't make any sense. It's because Australia and China had a good relationship, especially when it comes down to trade. Australia was benefiting a lot from trade with China. And they just lost about the export of about $20 billion a year. Why again? Because Australia is no different than Canada. Also, Australia is a sovereign state on papers, but you still have to bow to the master, whatever the master say. And you add to that Japan and South Korea, you know. And I don't shy away from saying this because it's the truth. Simple as that. So what Albanese is saying is that, well, this is a breakthrough meeting. It's nonsense. He's just saying this for domestic consumption, to show that here I am reaching out to China and all that. Truly, if Albanese wanted to reach out to China, you would have worked out the deal about the trade, the tensions that still exist. But he couldn't. That's why guys, don't ever fall for just the images you see. Oh, so-and-so shaking hands with so-and-so, that's it. That means relationships are good. No, not at all. Not at all. Those kind of settings and posters, whatever, it's for consumption, media and domestic and so forth, you know. Albanese cannot move an inch without being told what to do. Justin Trudeau cannot move an inch without being told what to do. Jacinda Ardern cannot move an inch without being told what to do. And the same apply to South Korea and Japan. And I'll say it straightforward because it's the truth. So now you know, when you see that video about the encounter between President Xi and Trudeau, you know why. This is why I wanted to come to air, on the air and share this video. So here's my question for you for today. And it's very simple because it makes me just laugh. Can Western leaders be trusted? Let me repeat this. Can Western leaders be trusted? Let me know what you think, and I would really like to read your feedback. As always, guys, prepare yourself for a changing world order. Till next time. Bye-bye.